Part 1. You will hear two teachers, Lucas and Linda, discussing the coming excursion of their language class. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Now listen and answer questions 1 to 6.
Well, we have this school excursion planned, but when exactly is it? Is it this Tuesday or Wednesday?
Well, it can't be Tuesday with the English tests taking place.
Ah, right, not Tuesday, but Wednesday.
That's right, all day Wednesday, taking a bus outside the city.
And where are we going?
Last month we went to Arthur Island, so this time we're going to the animal park.
Arthur Island was okay, but it was too cold. Let's hope the weather for this week's excursion is better. I don't suppose animals care about bad weather, but I certainly do. Have you heard the forecast?
Yes, and it's not too bad. Basically, they're saying Monday will be sunny,
Good.
but then the weather will change.
Not so good.
Yes, Tuesday we'll have some showers, but by Wednesday, the day of our excursion, it will be, well, their words are cold and cloudy.
Cold and cloudy. Well, as long as it isn't wet and rainy, I'm happy enough. We won't need umbrellas, just warm clothing. And what time will we get there?
Let's see, the bus picks us up at 8:30 a.m., and then it's an hour and a half on the road. So we arrive at 10 a.m. Sorry, with a 15 minutes break, that will actually be 10:15 a.m.
That's early enough. Then all our students can see the animals, have their fun, and do whatever they want to do.
Well, one fun event planned that day is Birds of Prey.
What's that?
That's when they bring out several birds of prey, eagles, falcons, kites, those sorts of birds, and throw pieces of meat into the air, and the birds swoop down and eat them. It's quite impressive.
Sounds great. Birds of prey. Are there any other activities?
There's a catered lunch at the park restaurant. We've already paid for that. And in the afternoon, I had a choice between the reptile display and the koala handling. In the reptile display, the students can handle live pythons and various other snakes.
Surely they'd rather hold koalas.
I'm sure, but the koalas can't be handled unless the weather's sunny. And given the forecast, I thought it better to choose the reptile display.
That's a shame. These Asian students would love the koala handle.
Yes, I know, but we can't control the weather.
And then we get back. What time will that be?
We leave the park at 4:30, but then we face traffic, so we won't get back until well after 6 p.m. It will most likely be 6:30. But that's better than the last trip. We didn't get home until 8:30 that time.
Yes, that was a bit too late, wasn't it?
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Lucas, I understand you've been doing some research regarding the breakdown by nationality of our student body. That must have produced some interesting results.
You're right. I got some statistics from head office.
I would imagine that most of our students are either Japanese or Chinese.
You imagine, right, but it's the Chinese who constitute the majority, but only just. I had thought Koreans might be second, but it's actually the Japanese, quite close behind. It's somewhat surprising, but obviously all those study tours that our university markets in Japan are bringing in students.
What's the breakdown exactly?
Japanese are a quarter of the whole, which is considerable. Last year they were only 16%, so that market has grown nicely. The only other proportions of some weight are the Indonesians and Koreans, about the same. Indonesians at 15%, and the Koreans are a little higher, not like last year when they were less than 10%.
I thought we'd have more Indonesians than Koreans.
Well, as I said, they're about the same, just like the Saudi and Thai student numbers, almost the same also, both just under 10.
Which one is bigger?
Thai students number just a fraction more. As for the other nationalities, collectively they're only 3%, so it wasn't worth giving each of them a separate category. I just grouped them under other. That's Vietnamese, South American, a couple of Russians, and so on.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2, you will hear a representative from Easy Travel Travel Agency explaining to some customers the benefits of his company. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello, everyone. Now, you're here because you're interested in travel, right? And you're in the right place. For at Easy Travel, we have the best deals for the best locations. We specialize in eco-travel or holidays designed to get you amongst nature, ignoring the hustle and bustle of big cities. So whether you want to hike in Nepal, as many people do, or follow some jungle paths in the rainforests of Queensland, we can give you the best deal. If you look at our office here, you'll see our overseas consultants. That's for trips overseas, obviously, to Europe, to North America, but primarily for the Asian market, which is generally more popular in this part of the world. Most people like that touch of the Orient, right? But they also like the domestic market, since this country offers its fair share of beautiful natural vistas. What about the deserts? Anyone? What about some striking red rock gorges? Then talk to our domestic consultants who can arrange anything you want, but they deal with the accounts in the morning, so you'll need to talk to them in the afternoon. And remember, our office doesn't open at night, sorry to say. Now, around the outskirts and outer regions of this city, there are many beautiful places that you might not be aware of, and the advantages of these regional locations are many. Mostly by being closer. Some of them can be done in a day tour. Yes, it's fast and convenient with none of those long-haul bus trips, which often leave you cramped and uncomfortable, and stuffing heavy suitcases into luggage racks. But I should tell you about our buses, those that are needed for the somewhat more distant holiday destinations. They definitely do not suffer from those problems I just mentioned. We use the services of the famous Sleek Line company, whose buses are known as the very best. Yes, they are big. Yes, they are comfortable. But what makes them especially different is the personal attendant who accompanies the driver, ready and willing to serve you and ensure that your trip is the very best. So, whether it's overseas or local, we can certainly give you what you want. Now, do you have any questions?
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Right. Let me orient you to our main Easy Travel office here. On this table right beside us are travel magazines for you to browse through. And on the wall next to that are many more for all parts of the world. Our 4 travel consultants sit over there on the other side of that long counter. That's right, 4 of them, side by side, all serving various regions. Now, let me tell you their specific functions. Firstly, the consultant on the left, next to the plant, is the local tours consultant, serving tours in the immediate vicinity of this city. Next to her is what we call regional tours, targeting the statewide options. Next to her is the interstate tours, and that can involve either buses or planes. In the former case, utilizing the Sleek Line bus service, as you know. And finally, next to her in the corner is general inquiries, which is self-explanatory. If you have questions of a general nature rather than one relating to specific destinations, you can go there. Now, as I said, we can do international tours, and for that, you need our big office just through that door, the one between those 2 plants. However, if your international tour is in the Asian region, which is generally our most popular option, then we deal with that in a separate room, the one opposite international tours, but not the corner one. Just go through that door on the left, the one next to that cupboard. The door next to that is, in fact, our general office, so please don't go through there. That's reserved for staff members only.
That is the end of part 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers to part 2. Part 3. You will hear 3 colleagues discussing their business presentation. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 24.
All right, team. Thanks for coming together. We're only 3 days away from the business presentation, so we've got to make sure everything's in order. Let's start with the data analysis. John, I believe you're handling that, correct?
Yes, I've been working on the data analysis, but I'm still waiting on the sales figures from the last quarter. The financial department hasn't sent them over yet, and without that data, I can't finalize the comparison graphs we need. Would it be possible to push the deadline for the data presentation until tomorrow afternoon? That would give me enough time to incorporate everything properly.
I see the problem, but we're tight on time. I don't think we can afford to push the deadline. I suggest that you use the preliminary data we already have. It's not ideal, but it'll give us something to work with for now. If we do get the final numbers before the presentation, you can make quick adjustments. Does that work for you?
I don't know if that's a good idea. If the final sales figures are very different from the preliminary ones, the graphs and our conclusions could be inaccurate. We'd be presenting potentially misleading information. What if we get a big surprise and the trends don't match our projection?
That's definitely a concern, but waiting for the final data might delay us too much. I think the safest option is to move forward with what we've got and make changes if necessary. I'll keep an eye on my inbox for the updated figures and make adjustments as soon as I receive them. If anything major changes, I'll let you both know immediately.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
All right, let's go with that for now, but we need to stay flexible. Keep me posted if anything shifts dramatically with the numbers. Now, what about the visual aids, Emily? How are we doing on the slides?
The slides are coming along, but I'm having a bit of a dilemma with the design. The client prefers muted tones for the color scheme, which I understand, but I'm worried it'll make the presentation look too plain. You know how they are with their branding. It's all very understated. I'm thinking of adding a bit of color to liven things up, but I don't want it to clash with their style. What do you think? Should I stick to the muted palette, or can we be a bit more creative?
I'm no designer, but I feel like muted tones could make the data harder to notice, especially with all the numbers and charts. If we're trying to highlight specific trends, we might need something a little brighter. What if you used the muted tones for the background, but incorporated some bolder colors for key data points?
That's what I was thinking too. Maybe using subtle highlights just for the most important parts of the presentation. I can use the client's preferred tones for most of the slides, but add emphasis where it's needed. We don't want the entire presentation to blend into the background.
I agree. I think a few pops of color will make it more engaging without going overboard. It's a balance. We want it to feel professional and in line with their branding, but still visually appealing. Go ahead and experiment with that. If it feels too much, we can always dial it back before the final review.
Okay, I'll work on that today. I'll send over a draft by tomorrow so we can review it together. I also need to make sure the charts align with the data you're finalizing, John. I'll leave space for last-minute changes if the figures arrive in time.
Got it. I'll make sure to prioritize getting you the final figures for the graphs. Speaking of which, do we know who's handling the introduction and conclusion for the presentation? Those need to tie everything together smoothly.
I can take the introduction. I've already sketched out some ideas for how to open, especially focusing on the client's goals and what they expect from this presentation. I'll keep it concise but engaging, setting the tone for what's to come.
That sounds good, Emily. I'll handle the conclusion then. We need to bring all the points together and leave a strong impression at the end. I'll emphasize the key takeaways and ensure the client feels confident in the recommendations we're making. Plus, I'll add some actionable steps for them to follow up on after the presentation.
Perfect. Do we have someone lined up to manage any Q&A at the end? Clients usually have follow-up questions, and we'll need to be ready to respond on the spot.
Good point. I think we should all be prepared to answer questions in our areas of expertise. John, you can handle any data questions. Emily, you can address any design or presentation structure questions. I'll cover overall strategy and recommendations. Does that sound good to everyone?
Absolutely. I think that covers all the bases.
Agreed. I'll make sure I'm ready to dive into the numbers if they ask for more detail.
Great, then we're almost there. The last thing we need to finalize is task delegation for some of the smaller jobs. The slides need to be formatted properly, and we also need to ensure all the files are organized and ready to go. Who can help with that?
I can jump in on the formatting side once I finish with the data. It shouldn't take me too long to get everything lined up. Just let me know when you're done with the slides, Emily.
Thanks, John. I'll have the draft of the slides, but
That is the end of Part 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4. You will hear a presentation by a medical historian discussing the fascinating journey of medicine from ancient remedies to modern scientific advancements. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
The history of medicine is full of incredible breakthroughs. Some of these discoveries have completely changed how we live today. Thousands of years ago, medical treatments were often based on trial and error. People relied on herbs, plants, and sometimes even magic to cure illnesses. While these early methods may seem outdated now, they laid the groundwork for modern medicine. Let's take a journey through some of the most important milestones in the history of medicine, from ancient practices to modern achievements like vaccines. One of the earliest forms of medical treatment was surgery. Ancient civilizations like the Egyptians and Greeks performed basic surgeries. They used sharp tools made of metal or stone. These early surgeries were usually done to treat wounds, fractures, or infections. However, they often lacked understanding of germs, and infections were common. One of the most well-known examples is trepanation, a procedure where a hole was drilled into the skull to relieve pressure or treat head injuries. This technique, surprisingly, has been found in ancient skulls across different cultures around the world. Moving forward, around the 5th century BCE, a significant shift happened in Greece with a man named Hippocrates. Often referred to as the father of medicine, Hippocrates argued that diseases had natural causes, not supernatural ones. His ideas were revolutionary for his time. He developed the theory of the 4 humours, which he believed controlled human health. These were blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. While this theory has been proven incorrect today, it was the foundation of medical practice for centuries. As we move through history, we see the development of hospitals. The first hospitals appeared during the Roman Empire. These hospitals weren't for everyone, though. They mostly treated soldiers and slaves. The Romans were also pioneers in public health, building aqueducts to bring clean water into cities and creating sanitation systems to prevent diseases from spreading. This idea of public health would grow to become an essential part of modern medicine. The Middle Ages, however, were a difficult time for medicine in Europe. Many scientific advancements made by the Greeks and Romans were lost or ignored. Medicine in this period was often a mix of religious beliefs and traditional practices. Monks and priests played a major role in treating the sick, using prayer and herbal remedies. Yet, during this time, something crucial happened: the rise of medical schools. In places like Italy, universities began to teach medicine, basing their lessons on ancient texts from the Greeks and Romans. This knowledge eventually led to greater medical understanding. One of the most dramatic turning points in medical history came during the Renaissance. During this period, scientists and doctors began to question old beliefs. They carried out experiments and dissected bodies to understand human anatomy better. One of the most important figures from this time was Andreas Vesalius, a Flemish physician. He published a groundbreaking book in 1543 called De Humani Corporis Fabrica, or On the Fabric of the Human Body. This was the first detailed study of human anatomy based on dissections. His work corrected many misconceptions about how the body functioned. The 19th century saw even more rapid advancements. One of the most crucial discoveries during this period was the understanding of germs. Louis Pasteur, a French chemist, developed the germ theory of disease, which argued that tiny microorganisms, or germs, were responsible for many illnesses. This discovery was revolutionary. It changed how doctors treated infections and led to the development of vaccines. Pasteur also created the first vaccine for rabies in 1885, a significant step forward in preventing deadly diseases. Another major advancement in the 19th century was the development of anesthesia. Before anesthesia, surgeries were incredibly painful and many patients died from shock. In 1846, the first successful surgery using ether as anesthesia was performed in Boston. This discovery allowed surgeons to perform longer, more complex operations without causing extreme pain to the patient. Around the same time, antiseptics were introduced by Joseph Lister, a British surgeon. He recognised the importance of sterilising surgical tools and cleaning wounds to prevent infections, further improving survival rates after surgery. As we move into the 20th century, the development of antibiotics transformed medicine. Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin in 1928 was one of the most significant breakthroughs. Penicillin was the first true antibiotic capable of killing harmful bacteria and saving countless lives. Its widespread use during World War II helped reduce the number of deaths caused by infections, making it one of the most impactful discoveries in medical history. In more recent years, vaccines have become one of the most powerful tools in modern medicine. The concept of vaccines dates back to Edward Jenner, who in 1796 created the first vaccine for smallpox. Jenner's discovery eventually led to the complete eradication of smallpox in the 20th century. Modern vaccines now protect us from many dangerous diseases, including measles, polio, and influenza. In fact, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the critical role vaccines play in global health. Scientists raced to develop vaccines to protect people from the virus, marking another significant moment in the history of medicine. While the history of medicine is full of incredible achievements, it's important to remember that medical science is always evolving. Today, researchers are...
That is the end of Part 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers to Part 4.